Welcome,
Okay.
everybody. Another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast. And with me today is Shelby. And we've had Shelby on the podcast before talking about her second birth. And she's since had her third birth. And it's a very, she describes it as a very healing birth. And this is where the sort of journey can take us, is each birth has much to teach us and can lead us down a path that we can't even anticipate. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Shelby's story today. Thank you, Shelby, for coming, my darling, coming back.
Yeah. Coming
Yeah.
back to tell the good tale.
Yeah. So how old's your bub now?
She's a year. So I had her April last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So you've been on a bit of a ride. Do you want to give us a quick overview of your first two births and then how you felt coming into baby number three?
absolutely. My first birth, and you can go back and listen on your podcast somewhere in there. It was, I had lots of learning experiences from my first and second births.
Mm.
And I'm so glad I was able to go, go back for the third. My first, I had her in 2018 in September. And I'm a prenatal yoga, postnatal yoga teacher, really experienced in that field. And I did all the things to prepare my body physically, and that was my main focus with
Mm.
this birth and what breaths to use, what hand mudras do I need? Like I had all these resources and it was almost overwhelming. And all the different types of pranayama breath techniques. And going into birth, I was pretty fearful because
Mm.
I know my pattern is as I'm scared to try things if I know it's going to hurt. This is how like I go snowboarding or any other things like that. I'm calculated, and I like to prepare so much that like I went to the birth classes and all that, and that's helpful for general knowledge, but it wasn't very deep enough, I've
Mm.
discovered. So I went for a water birth with a continuative care with my midwife. And with my babies, she was 40 plus 7 days or, 41 weeks when I went into labor and I had artificial, um, sorry, I'm
Right.
pausing to reflect on where it went. Yeah. So this birth, we had the stretch and sweep. So I opted in for that the
Yeah.
night I went into labor, as it felt like everything was pretty tight, all that physical work I've been doing through that first birth or towards the first birth was probably too much. My body wasn't ready to let go, but we went for the stretch and sweep, and my contractions were so painful, but I stayed with it. And um, actually, I was really fighting against it during that birth. Like
Mm.
I stayed with it and held strong to not opting for pain relief. Um, and just kind of was stubborn, maybe out of fear of pain relief, but anyway, I was so in pain in that first one. No one told me how hard the contractions were going to be because they said, you're a yoga teacher, it'll be a breeze, where I just froze and I barely moved in labor. So these little pieces have led me to the third birth.
Mm.
And I ended up having the water birth after a pretty long labor, about 24 hours later. And we did have the rupture of membranes. And that made it really intense when we had that. The water's broken by the midwife. And I was probably pushing for close to 3 hours, but I did never feel their fetal ejection reflex in that one. I was kind of feeling like I know we were that dilation point where because I was getting checked throughout as well, monitored at the birth center. And, I just didn't know what I was doing really. I've had all my
Mm.
trust in the medical system. I had a bit of knowledge, but not like the depth that I do today.
Yeah.
And, around 9 o'clock that night, after being at the hospital probably 4 hours, we, yeah, gave birth to her in the bath. And I didn't know how to connect to my baby. I did not think about the part after when the baby comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were encouraging me to connect to baby. And I just didn't know how I was a shell of a human after that experience of birth.
Mm.
I felt so shook and I lost a lot of blood. They estimated 2.2 liters, so a hemorrhage. Got me on the bed, and I had retained placenta. So I had to go to theater that night. And at that point, I was completely wiped out and
Yeah.
finished. And luckily, we had colostrum stored, so my husband was able to like nurse her a bit.
Mm.
He was a bit bewildered too.
So
Yeah,
that birth was long, it was hard. You had a
yeah,
long pushing stage and there was issues with the placenta. So that would have been a very, very intense period. And the sometimes when women come out of birth and we expect there to be this big rush of love, it isn't always like that. If you've been through a huge journey like that, um, the bonding can also be delayed. So coming into your second birth, what did you do differently?
yeah. So I definitely had that fear going into my second. I also was experiencing a stage two prolapse,
Mm,
and those symptoms were a bit heightened. This was about 2 years later I conceived.
yeah,
We conceived, so the babies they're 2.5 years apart now. Um, yeah, going into it, I had some fear around vaginal birth again. After I also had a 3B tear in that birth as well. So
mm,
obviously there was some residing things, but I did go a bit more in depth and I did a course with you as well, like a refresher with my husband to know how to approach labor and work together as a team. And we
yeah,
also had a doula for this one. So that felt good to know there was extra support
yeah,
and knowing that I needed to commit to like one breath at least. And I think I was going with a breath, like the longer exhales that you'd recommended. And I remember listening a lot to like your meditations and things like that during labor. Like I love napping and I would listen to that. And I was going to focus on the golden hour and connecting to my baby to help the oxytocin flow and just that recovery for the placenta to come out smoothly. And that was a big focus. And I had little images around my house, doing all the prenatal yoga, like really feeling, connected in a way to baby. Like I was really trying to connect to this baby. And I didn't know if I was having a girl or boy this time. I thought that was a nice mystery to have.
yeah.
And, so ended up back in labor. It was a long, um, let's see, towards the end, 40 weeks, I started feeling that early labor starting, and it would fizzle out by the time I'd get up to have a shower or something like that. I remember one week and I thought she was coming around her due date. It was April again. And it must have been positioning. And my midwife said something like, if you're in good labor, you'll know. And it gave me a bit of permission to try to relax about it and wait until I'm properly in labor. And about a week later, after trying some spinning baby stuff to help with like positioning in case, and I'd been seeing chiropractic all throughout and acupuncture, and he was like, really pull, putting pressure on this acupressure. We're trying to gently encourage her to come out. But
Mm,
I believe I did have a stretch and sweep again with this one, with my impatience and a bit of fear of wanting to get it done.
yeah,
And so I had that and went into labor like that day. It like really progressed. And I was trying to do all the things like build IKEA beds and things as you do when you're in labor, in denial, really, trying to get everything done.
yeah.
My little one was there. She was like patting my back during contractions, knowing the baby was coming, which was pretty special. And she went to bed, and I had my doula come over as they really started kicking in, getting pretty intense. And I thought, oh, maybe like we're going to be on. And I pretty much planned to go to the hospital. There was a part of me that thought, wouldn't that be cool if I just magically had the baby at home as, that'd be interesting. But my midwife was going to meet me at the hospital. It wasn't planned, for
Mm,
meeting at home. I wasn't in the home birth program or anything. So, but I wanted to stay home as long as possible until my in-laws came over and I felt like I could not be loud or myself when they were there. This
mm,
is around the middle of the night because they need to stay for my older one. Um, and then we went to the hospital pretty shortly after they arrived. It was probably around 3 a.m. And we got there, and my labor, I was dealing with the contractions better. I was breathing through them, not freezing. And that was
mm,
a bonus.
yeah.
And I was feeling really like in a meditative state, but time was going by, and I was pretty still, like sitting there with my breath. rather than moving around and flowing. I would just kind of stay like I was in a yin yoga class where you are meant to stay pretty still. That was usually my approach. And it got to around getting close to sunrise coming up and almost 8 a.m. My midwife was going to switch shifts with the other midwife taking on. So that was a bit sad to know she was going to leave. But so we tried to break my waters again at 6 a.m. And I could almost feel the baby flip to posterior.
Mm.
And that's when the troubles kind of started, the cascade of interventions. I was getting more monitoring and they were starting to be concerned about her heart rate. And at that point, I was trying to get more active and sit on the bouncy ball. And it was so painful with that posterior. And it got to the point where they were talking about assisted delivery and transferring me to the birth suites. And at that point, I remember I got into full feeling the fetal ejection reflex as well.
Yeah.
And so this was like a really, the timing of it was pretty profound. Like either I'm going to go down the assisted delivery route, which I was really terrified of, especially with my vaginal birth. I don't think I had cleared all the fear. So I was pretty loud and boisterous as we're going down the hall and to decide whether or not all these exams they do when they're deciding if the baby's too high, like determining the positioning, also factoring in the heart rate. So it was pretty intense going in. And it turns out I had to get an emergency cesarean or the unplanned cesarean.
Yeah.
And I was actually happy with the outcome because I knew I did not want a assisted delivery, the
Yeah.
forceps or kiwi cup.
Yeah.
So I went in, my doula couldn't be there. My husband came in later, not knowing what he was going to come into. Again, he was kind of left in the dark. And it was pretty, it's such a different vibe when you're in the surgery on the table
Mm.
and they're playing whatever music, just casual, but it was kind of a nice, relaxed atmosphere. I fully surrendered as I do remember a part of your course at the time saying to just, you have to surrender for a C-section, like if that is the outcome. And
Yeah.
that kind of played in the back of my mind. And I was pretty jolly knowing I was about to meet the baby. And the anesthesiologist he was delightful. So it was a positive C-section, really.
Mm.
Um, yeah, they had her sitting
So,
there and I just sang to her. Yeah, and I was singing to her and connecting and yeah, discovered it was another girl, and that was beautiful. So we had a great postpartum too. But as I'd set up a meal train with all my friends to bring food, and that really helped me heal with a C-section.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
So you'd had two very different types of birth. How were you feeling coming into baby number three?
Yeah, Tracy, I did not think, I think on our last chat, I was not sure I would try again for another.
Yeah.
Wrapping your head around three is a bit more of, oh, we might need to move house, might have to consider cars, all these things.
Yeah.
Plus, I had like both ends of the spectrum. I've had two surgeries with both my births. Like, what was the third one going to bring? And
Mm.
around that time, probably a couple months before, oh, maybe a year before conceiving, my baby was around 10 months old, my second one, the one
Yeah.
from the C-section. I discovered this style of breath work that was really helping me as a mother.
Mm.
And it's called Rebirthing Breathwork Mastery. So it is like a branch of rebirthing breathwork.
Yeah.
And it is just a beautiful style that is really agenda free. It's really the space that you want to be in if you had someone supporting you for your birth. And I thought, wow. And I was just really wrapped by this style and how there's intention setting. And so I really, a year into it, and I went to the training that year. And so, alongside my studies of rebirthing breathwork, it really taught me to surrender a whole lot more and get into my body because it does talk a lot about body sensations. I used to try to soften the intensity, but this style of breathworks taught me to, explore it and stay with the sensations.
Mm.
And I've looked a lot about my birth patterns and things like that. Like Jane Hardwick Collins talks about this a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, my imprints. My mother had epidurals, and so I think my notion coming into the world was like it's not safe to feel, and so it was a lot of work for me to just process like how scared I was of birth. like to admit that. So by the time I wanted to conceive, um, it only took like one try. It was like she was waiting there for a long time, this baby, this mystery baby that I knew in January 2023 I really wanted a baby, but I got too fearful. I was like, no, I'm not ready. I think I'm done. And then somebody asked me, a coach I was working with, what's the one thing you would do if you had no fear? And we were talking about business and like work and stuff like that. And I just came up with like, I would have another baby if I had no
Oh,
fear. And then that's when I knew, like, deep down, I really wanted another baby, but I had so much to come up against,
mm.
knowing I'd had to go for a VBAC. I wasn't going to willingly go into a C-section. So there was a lot to clear mentally and physically. My body, like, had all this fear stored, and
Shelby, can
these
I
things
come
about
in
getting
here?
stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that we're having this conversation
Hmm.
because in this podcast, we talk a lot about what can happen and how to manage it and where you have agency and tools and breathing and all of these wonderful things that can support us. And then we talk about the subconscious and the mind. And what we don't always appreciate is that when a woman comes in to giving birth, she's bringing with her a baggage full of experiences, perceptions, belief systems, patterns of behavior, not only from her own life, but potentially from her mother's life, from people close to her. And we can't quantify the impact that those experiences can have on the birth process. What you're describing now is a path of healing that from the first birth to the second birth and now to the third birth, where you're really acknowledging the patterns that can be impacting our birth experience. So I love that the breathwork has given you the opportunity to really explore that. What did you discover about your history that you think was having an impact on those first two births?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for summarizing that up so well too. Yeah, my overall discovery and what I would take into this birth. First, I acknowledged that I didn't trust birth. And this
Mm,
is something it felt like so imposter syndrome to say, especially if I was going to be prenatal, postnatal yoga.
yeah,
So I sat with that a while and then I came to a point where I was able to clear it through lots of reaching out for support around people in Canberra, other therapists and things like this.
yeah,
And I realized I wasn't mobile in labor. Like I said before, I got really still. And so my doula that I had, Kylie, she had all these extra tools, and a birth sling was really helpful
yeah.
to help me be more upright and moving. And I know this helps like the positioning of the baby,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can I just go in there a little bit deeper? When you say you were still, do you believe that you were in a freeze state, like a defensiveness state, or was it a relaxed still?
It was more of a freeze, a shutdown response, and this is
Right.
present in my life. So I was
Yeah.
trying to think of a way you might be able to pinpoint that,
Yeah.
if you know that's a present for you, knowing your
Mm,
nervous system response when you're under
yeah.
pressure. And, my whole life I've procrastinated. I've been dealing with like not able to perform tasks until like the last minute, things
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
If my kids are having a meltdown, and I know you teach with like toddlers and things like this, I kind of tend to get in a like a shutdown. I want to go doom scroll state and
Yeah.
avoid the
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, so masking
This
and
is, yeah, see, the freeze state, the fight flight, the collapse state, the attach, these are all defense mechanisms within the nervous system that support us to deal with life when we're out of balance and when we need to protect ourselves. And so it's a normal, healthy response. But one of
mm,
the things we don't want that to happen is when we're in labor. And so exploring your patterns of behavior when you get overwhelmed or things get difficult is a powerful way to start to unlock your potential. And it sounds like this third birth gave you the opportunity to really look at how you do life. So,
Yeah.
what other things do you think you discovered that was impacting those first two births?
Mm. Yeah, that's definitely a big piece. My pain is too much, it's overwhelming, and I
Yeah,
freeze,
and you
right?
freeze.
I
Yeah.
avoid. Hmm. I thought of it. I think the big one was a lot more surrender, and in my whole leading up to birth, I was a bit more relaxed about my exercise and just trying to focus on softening pelvic floor,
Mm,
not as much toning. So that's like the physical layer, but
yeah. You
emotionally, I
said,
just knew I would have to go towards the pain, like
yeah.
right into it and amplify the sensations. And then, paired with my rebirthing breathwork mastery, in a session, you're going to really explore, um, you're navigating things towards your intentions through the
Mm,
body. So
mm,
you're doing a gentle breathing that activates the parasympathetic response,
yeah,
which is a great tool to take into labor
that's right.
for me. And I just stuck with that. And I knew when the pain came, I would stay with it. And then that like allows it to be seen. Like I feel like that's when you're safe enough and ready and willing enough, is what we say in breath work a lot. Um, and in pain enough, you're willing to shift it, like you're able to shift it. But if you continue to freeze, it's gonna just remain the same, isn't it? And this definitely applies to life.
Wow.
Um,
So you
yeah,
were
so I
having
stayed with
these,
it.
yeah, to
Yeah.
stay with it. That's a really interesting comment. Let's dig into the third birth and tell us how it unfolded and what
Yeah.
was it that you were doing that caused you to respond very, very differently. And then, of course, we'll get to hear the outcome of that.
Yeah. So leading into it, I really tuned into like what my plan was. I decided to stay with my midwife because I knew her. She's familiar. I thought about getting a private midwife and exploring, home birth or something. But I thought, well, that can't determine the outcome.
Mm,
And in the end, all I want is an ideal birth, where I feel supported. I feel like I have free will, like trust. And my dog is speaking. Um, and when I would try to visualize it, that was a bit all like I could get an image of me, surrounded by love, protected, my children present, but I wasn't sure how that was going to play out.
yeah.
And in in my lineage, like my teacher talks about the ideal labor time, and we talk about imprints on babies, like we get these in birth and stuff. It's
Mm,
the biggest experience we're ever going to have is being born, really, and birthing.
yeah.
And 4 to 8 hours, she wrote down, it's kind of obscure, but is the ideal time for labor, like really active labor. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to have this baby within 4 to 8 hours. I wrote all this out and I wrote, she's going to be born by sunrise so that I'm laboring at night. And then her sisters, the baby sisters can meet her. So I wrote all these wild intentions that almost didn't feel real, but I said, I have to try. What's the point of not trying? Like to go for an ideal birth. And, I felt through the pregnancy really supported and I was conscious of who I was letting in my space, um, repelling almost like having a boundary around if people questioned, put fear on me because I had had a C-section. Because it's pretty brave to go towards a VBAC. And I was reading Hazel Kettle's book,
Yeah.
um, was the word birth after cesarean. And yeah, aiming for victory and feeling triumphant. That is what I wanted. And so my body, everything like goes towards that. And so as I went into labor that day, I was 40 plus 5. And I remember being fully ready to just have this baby. It was pretty warm in Canberra. And school had gone back after Easter, and I was reluctant to do the school drop off that morning. I had so much to do, and I had to take my 3 year old or 2 year old then to swimming. And I had to get in the pool, very pregnant, like, and I was feeling the contractions as well. I was feeling mild, 30 or so minute apart contractions. I thought Braxton Hicks. I thought it'll be like last time with my second that it's just going to fizzle out and I'll be in labor out next week. And when I got back from swimming, I thought maybe I should jump onto this. And I went and saw my acupuncturist. She's incredible and to help with positioning because this is something I was still a bit concerned about.
Yeah.
And um, came back, got my daughter, and I felt like that could be progressing because they were still there and I was getting excited. And I went to pick her up from my other one from school, and the daughter, my middle one, she was having her first tantrum like that day. I said, of all the days, you're not going to walk across the road to school to get the sisters. So I had to call my husband to come get her, and I bailed and went to the chiropractor. But that there tells you that she must have known something was happening.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't about to be the baby anymore. She was the
Yeah.
easiest baby, and that was the first time we were butting heads.
Wow.
And yeah, so she knew.
She could pick up
And I
on.
came,
Mm.
yeah, came home that afternoon and I ate some food, went for a walk with my dog. And then I went to go see the Born at Home premiere that was here in Canberra last year.
Yeah.
And what a movie to go see. I didn't think I'd get to go see it because I thought I might have the baby by then. And someone had a spare ticket and I went and surrounded by beautiful women. You were probably there.
Birth
There was just so
workers.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the best place to be. Like, and I was definitely in labor. I had 20-minute apart or 15-minute or so contractions, and I was sitting next to my chiropractor, and like my doula was there. It was just, sir, I could cry. It was just such a beautiful room to
Yeah.
be in, watching this movie.
Wow.
Ah, and I didn't think like, oh, the baby will be born at home. I didn't I wasn't attached to the outcome. I was just
Yeah.
open to the experience.
Yeah.
And so driving home, it was around 9:30. I got home that night. Just and everyone like could see how pregnant I was. They were like, maybe we'll see you tomorrow. Like we didn't know if I was gonna really progress. Got home, pulled the washing off the line. I was kind of annoyed at my husband for leaving it out at 9:30, but I guess he was busy putting the kids down. But I was like, oh, I have to do this and I'm pregnant. And I came in and we were cleaning up frantically. I must have had that, early labor, when it's all starting, you start to get that
Yeah.
frantic energy. And I was like, I can't get settled. And I was like, I think we need to have sex. It might be the last time because it really helps labor progress, like, and helps you connect to your partner because you're about to be
Yeah.
on this journey together.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's great when you're postpartum because, those hormones that get released and yeah, so we did, and I couldn't go back to sleep. It was around 11 o'clock or so, and I was like, I'm not, this is kicking in. And I put my breathwork teacher had a 45-minute track I would listen to
Yeah.
just to feel like I'm guided, with the rebirthing breathwork style.
Yeah.
And I was in my bubble, but I was on my breath sling and just moving on the ball. My husband put a snowboard movie on for me to help me just get into this flow state. And I had the TENS machine. My doula had all these extra things she lent me. It was amazing. Like I was trying that out and just kind of staying with it. I was like, I can be with this. And once and you had a podcast recently with Sarah Buckley, which
Mhm.
really summarizes this, like you get into that flow state when this pain, this is a normal thing. This is part of,
Yeah.
yeah, I just got comfortable with it. I was with it. This is here. And I tried to smile with the contractions and just really surrender. And I'd get into some positions and I would know like that this is horrendous. Like I was squatting or something and I was like, this is awkward. I need to get up. I'd practiced a lot with a birth sling and just moving around to like get familiar with how I want to move my body in labor too, with like an embodiment coach. And yeah, so it was all playing out like beautifully. And then my husband was squeezing my hips around like 2 or 3 a.m. on the pull-out couch, and pop, my waters broke gently. And it was
Yeah.
so healing because I'd always had my waters artificially ruptured. And for that, like I just was so happy to experience like my waters breaking because I used to get jealous of these women in movies where it just breaks and off in labor we go. So that was like a big win. I was already celebrating. And then the contractions started kicking in. I got in the shower to clean up, and then my husband was like, "Oh, we need to fill up the tub for you so you can sit in the tub." And so we had to turn off the shower, and I was on the bed like, "Oh, I think it's going." I was hanging on my bed, and it did not feel good to be hanging out for a little bit there. And he called my midwife, and she's her husband next to her. It's like 3 a.m. He's like, "Oh, I think he hears these phone calls all the time too," she says. And he's like, "Yeah, that girl's in labor." And I was pretty content though, like to be at home, and I thought I'll just stay as long as I can because I feel like my labors were always so slow and I didn't think it was going to
Yeah.
unfold like this or I would feel that comfortable at home.
Yeah. But this one felt like it was progressing.
Yeah, and I thought if I
Mm.
get in, is it going to stall? Like I was really
Yeah.
precarious around how in the past they've stalled or they got stuck. And I made a purpose to stay upright and keep breathing and just treating it a bit like a breathwork session. And my doula came over and I was in the tub and it felt like things kind of slowed down, but I was able to relax and have a rest. So I got out and she encouraged me to go to the toilet and it was becoming a bit hard to wee. So we sensed maybe there was some blocking, something kind of blocking the baby because she encouraged me to, like, suggested maybe have you tried to feel the head? And I could feel the baby's head, like about halfway of my middle finger.
Yeah.
And that was exciting to know she's close and I could push and feel like a progress. So it really took it into my own hands, really, this birth. Just with gentle guidance from my doula and my husband was encouraging me and just supporting me. And my girls were sleeping the whole time during this, which is incredible. They
Wow.
didn't wake up. And around 6 a.m., I by then I was like wanting to just push and things. And we thought with my bladder as well, and I could feel almost like baby was struggling to get down and like the head was squishy almost, like where I was touching.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a mystery. Like, why isn't she coming down? And we were starting to think maybe we need the paramedics here in case we need to transfer. And so they came because we thought if I got in the car, it would be too clunky.
Mm.
That was the reasoning there. And I was on the toilet, and that is the best place to go if you're feeling stuck. Like flowing, like everything just would flow more when I was on there. I could feel like the
Yeah.
widening of my cervix, and it was progressing well. The ambulance were there from around 6 a.m. and they arrived on the scene like, oh, this is exciting. There's a woman and two men, and they quickly met the level and turned the lights down because they came in like a big entrance and they calmed things down a little bit. And they were on the side of caution, like we should take her, but also, oh, it seems close. And we all were a bit like this. And at one point, my doula, I asked her to hold my belly up because it felt like it might help that positioning with
Yeah.
her stuck on the brim potentially. And yeah, after maneuvering, like my hands pressed against the wall, supporting my whole weight so my legs could be floppy and just let the contractions work. And I was grunting and smiling and breathing and yeah, just free flowing in my bathroom. And I ended up in the position where I was squatting like next to the shower and I had one leg out, monkey's lunge. It was pretty, I didn't think I would birth sitting upright, but perfect for the positioning. And the ring of fire was happening. I could feel that. And I recall one of my breath worker friends with her VBAC, she said, I just stayed with it. And I kept saying that I'm going to stay with it. I'm staying with it. I know it's close. And the paramedic was behind me. I'm holding on my husband. Kylie had my belly. And eventually the baby pushed out and the paramedic nearly dropped her. It came out so fast and a gush of waters and more fluids came out too with it.
Yeah.
A bit slippery. It's hard to recall exactly how we picked her up, but I had her and he mentioned something about the cord. It wasn't fully wrapped or anything, but it was maybe around her head like this, from her chin up to her head. And
Yeah.
somehow I instinctively just undid it and had her in my arms and discovered at first I thought it was a boy. And then I had to look again. I was just so like blown away at the fact we all did it and I was so happy and yeah, discovered we had a third girl. Hilarious. But yeah, and the paramedics were really excited, like really happy. We're all so happy to have the baby. And also that was 7:12 a.m. when she was born. And I had written like by sunrise. And this is before my girls wake up, my other girls. And we went to the bed and they checked the APGAR score and everything. She scored really high, like really healthy baby. But her head had the pronounced, from the brow positioning, And I think this is how my second was, and maybe my oldest was too. But coming out forehead first instead of like the crown of head,
Right.
um, that caused swelling. So she had a bit of a manatee look to her, a cute little manatee, and had her on the bed with me. And my bed was actually really uncomfortable. I almost wanted like a hospital type bed. I couldn't get comfortable, I remember, but I was really celebrating the fact I did it. And I
Yeah.
had a successful VBAC, and I couldn't believe it was at home.
Wow.
Um, they heard my history a bit more, and they thought, let's get you to the hospital because of my history of hemorrhaging. And
Mm.
I was like, yes, we'll go. But first, we cut the cord around 10 minutes after it finished pulsing. And then we needed to wake up my older two girls to meet the baby. So they came in, and my oldest said she had heard me, but she was waiting for us to come get her when she could
Oh.
hear the baby. So it was really sweet for them to meet her. And because we'd been reading books about birth at home, like as a possibility to prepare them a bit. And they just rocked up, and their baby sister was there. And we
Mm.
stayed for a little bit longer. And then I got into the ambulance and rode over there. And my baby Jindy was like on my chest the whole ride.
Yeah.
And I could feel a lot of pain in my lower back. And my midwife thinks this is probably the placenta had already detached by then. And we got there, and I remember it was so painful in my back. And when we arrived to the birth suite room, um, let's see, oh yeah, she was already unattached. So I handed the baby to my doula, and I sat on the toilet, and just the placenta just slid out. I did this kind of straw breath, through pursed lips, and it just slipped out perfectly. Like maybe I was holding the baby. It was just so easy. And I came back onto the bed, felt like a queen, like the fact I did that, had a shower. We ended up getting 2 stitches, but I had the gas. And at that point, I was like just having so much fun. Like I was just so happy. I was actually laughing while I
Shelby.
was getting my stitches. So it was just a beautiful meeting my midwife again. She was
Mm.
really happy. Um, she was almost a bit sad that I didn't make it into the hospital to be there, but
Yeah.
we're all happy with the outcome, and like it's quite fortunate that everything turned out so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunate, but there was some planning in there, wasn't there? So, as you look at that
Mhm.
story now, what do you think made the biggest difference to you being able to manage that birth differently to your first two?
Well, the biggest difference is believing in myself and
Believing it.
trusting physiological birth. I
Mm.
studied so much I wanted to know everything about physiological birth. And
Yeah.
a big thing that helped me was learning about the cascade of interventions.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's like I had listened to something around that day, and normally I would have thought about the path of getting my waters broken, and that's where looking into that really helped me, and reading those books and just
Mm.
really immersing myself in all things birth. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just
What
trusting
is
best case.
trusting? So, it was a real journey in reclaiming that trust in yourself and in your body's ability to get through it, particularly after two quite tricky births. Um,
Yes.
that piece on trusting is so very difficult for a modern woman to do that because we've got our head full of all sorts of things of what can happen. And even our caregivers are not necessarily taught to trust the process because every day they help birth along. Sometimes they create the very problems they solve. Um, but more often than not, they're a wonderful safety net. But of course, every woman that comes in to give birth has a different mindset, whether she's consciously aware of it or not, around her belief in her ability to get through this or to trust her body. And that journey of trust and reclaiming the understanding that Mother Nature is way more superior than anything in a bottle, than anything in a hospital, and we're not always used to optimizing the gifts and the resources that she gives us through our own sort of preparation. And it's not always something that can be done in a pregnancy either. Like your story is a beautiful story of each birth got you to the next space, which got you to the next space of ultimately learning to trust and learning to stay with the intensity of what it was that you were experiencing. So, Shelby's experience here has a lot to teach us around the trust. What can you shed light on some of the turning points in your preparation, Shelby, that you did? You said you did a lot of preparation and learning about the process. You wanted to learn as much as you could about the process. What were the other levers that helped you to trust?
Well, I got to a place where I thought I would actually go see a therapist as well,
Mm,
to clear any traumas from my previous births and
yeah,
really talk about it. And, I haven't mentioned like half the stuff that I did to prepare for this. So it was
yeah,
no walk in the park. It was full dedication. I was so
mm,
determined to do this, to have the ideal birth. But it came to a point of like believing that I was worthy of it as well,
mm,
and I deserved an ideal birth,
mm,
because we inherently are. And I needed to birth like where I felt safe, and whether that was at the hospital. I remember seeing the obstetrician and discussing all the options about, am I allowed in the water and all this, but ultimately knowing that I can say no whenever I want to.
mm,
And this is up to me, like to really trust myself. And this came from, during some sessions, we came to discover like my inner child, an 11-year-old that felt like she was a bit left behind when my parents divorced. Like
yeah,
this is how deep you can go
yeah,
sometimes. And I was able to resolve that quite a bit, enough to know that, someone, I have capacity to feel the pain that she felt at the time.
yeah,
And even going back to my mother's line, like we were talking about earlier, and
mm,
she did the best she could with what she
mm,
had. And,
yeah,
I have nothing against that. They're always trying our best. And so are parents as well. And
mm,
so it was me stepping into, I'm the adult now. I'm the elder nervous system. I don't have to be scared anymore. Like I
yeah,
had to tell myself this. And this was the night I went into labor. I did tell myself this when I was out pulling the washing in, and I felt a little bit scared about the dark and the night coming ahead. And
mm,
I told my little self, like, you don't have to be scared anymore. Like we've done all this work, and we just have to go towards and trust all the stages of birth and know that you're supported. And if you're not, you're supported. Like I believed, put my trust into God. If it was
mm,
all too much,
yeah,
I would just give it, surrender.
over. Mm.
Yeah. So
Oh,
ultimately,
gee.
I just want other women to just birth how they feel safe. Like it's all about
Mm.
safety, isn't it? And,
It is about
we hope.
safety. Yeah. And not just safety of ourselves right now, at whatever
Mm,
age we are when we're going in to give birth with this particular pregnancy, but it's about safety of the little girl, of the
yeah.
history, of where we've come to get to this point. What paths have we had to walk? What experiences have we had to have? And what our innate defenses are in order to shut down certain parts of ourselves when life gets too overwhelming or too much. And your story is a classic healing journey in that you started to work through the breath work, through your previous experiences, with this intrinsic desire to do it differently, to, come into a different space, to really be ready to not just have another baby, but to lean into it, whatever it was going to deliver for you, to really learn to trust your capacity to get through it. It's an incredible story you've shared with us today, Shelby. Tell us a little bit about how you were able to lean into the sensations this time, because you had a real mindset shift from particularly your first birth, which was incredibly intense, to this birth, which you really kind of stepped into and leaned into. Tell us the difference and how what you were doing when you were leaning in. What did that actually mean for you?
Yeah. There's something I read in Jane Hardwick Collins' book, 10 Moons,
Mm,
and it really hit me because she went for a VBAC as well. that was part of her history. And she said something about like, yeah, going right into the pain.
Yeah.
You have to go right in because if we resist it, that saying, what we resist persists. And it's
Yeah.
so true. Like if we are gonna shy away from it, we're gonna have to turn to external resources rather than really
Mm.
going within and just letting that pain be seen and felt and even amplifying it. And I forget how she describes it, but it's a great book if somebody wants to look into it. But that really was like a great anchor to have in my mind to stay
Mm.
with it. And like my friend had said, I stayed with it. And I had written these affirmations out, and intentions to remember. And I could just read a couple, but it took me a lot to get my on board and know that resisting wasn't going to help. I was still able to breathe, but I was seeing it separate from me, the pain. I know
Mm.
it's I remember loving that affirmation. My contractions aren't bigger than me because they're from me,
Yeah.
but it didn't connect. It wasn't embodied. And so I really, all of these number of breath sessions I did and all this work, I really had to befriend my body as I was numb when I was born. I was a epidural baby,
Mhm.
and so I came to the world with that feeling of it's not safe to feel.
Yeah.
And I could see this, like, I've touched on this with my 10-year-old self and even a sensation of like waiting till the last minute to come to earth. If we
Mm.
go in a breathwork session, I remember this, I had this body sensation of it was too scary to jump into my body, like wherever pre-existence is, whatever you want to believe. But
Yeah.
um yeah, to really accept the pain, yeah, and to accept like we we can have this full spectrum of emotions and feelings. It's still something I work with today.
Yeah.
And I know during birth it was hard, but I know the only way out was through. And
Yeah.
I had to go with it. That summarizes it, but
Yeah. Did it
yeah,
change the way you experienced them?
it did. Yeah, I trusted it more. I knew it was getting me closer.
Yeah.
And so I would kind of smile. And I've heard this, people say these things, right?
Mm.
But I'd finally like started to believe it and feel it. And I like really just tried to drop into my body, and get
Mm.
out of my mind, trying to calculate how long it's been. Like
Yeah.
I really just tried to get into that flow state that you mentioned with like,
Mm.
yeah, I was listening and that's the best way to describe it is like when you go
Yeah.
in it, it gets you into the flow and in the rhythm of it.
Mm.
And definitely moments where I was like, oh, this is so intense and stuff, but just being with it and like,
Being with it, holding
yeah,
space
that's
for
all.
it. Wow. This is a
Yeah.
really unique conversation we've had on this podcast, and I'm really enjoying it. It's reminding me of another woman who came and did my birth preparation with her partner, and they were both Buddhist and they were both very devoted meditators. So when they learnt the practices and the whole process of down regulating stress, and they really got it. And they discovered, that birth isn't always painful and it can be painless and even ecstatic and even orgasmic. And so she was on, she
Mhm.
was on, I'm going to have one of those. Thanks very much. Anyway, she went into
Yeah.
labor, and when she was at home in the early stages, her sensations were really painful. And her response to that in her own mind was, what am I doing wrong? This shouldn't be painful. This should be painless. And she was shooting a lot on herself. And then
Mhm.
she went into the birth center, and her midwife was watching her, and she was really struggling. She had this beautiful big baby boy who was pushing at the door, so she was having this very intense labor. And her midwife said to her, you're resisting the sensation. See if you can step into it. And she said it was in that moment that I leaned into it. And she said it got more intense, but something gave way and it became more doable. And she said from then on in, I didn't resist it and I just welcomed every sensation and I was able to stay with it. And it's exactly what you're describing is that ability to
Yeah.
hold space for it, the intensity of whatever it is that you're experiencing. And my darlings, all of those people listening to this today, this is what parenting is about. Okay. If you've ever looked at little ones, if you've ever watched a toddler have a meltdown, they're feeling they're able to do this beautifully. They're able to lean into the frustration, into the anger. It's a whole body experience. They don't resist it. It's like it's almost like a reflex. And then the body releases this enormous amount of emotion and intensity and hardness and awfulness, and then the next minute, the toddlers are walking around like nothing happened.
Yeah, they have really healthy nervous
They
systems.
have very
They
healthy
can
nervous systems. They
go
haven't
through it.
learnt to
Where
resist it.
we take a while to
Exactly.
catch up to them. Like,
We
hold on, we haven't
do.
got.
And as
Yeah,
parents, we
they're
can
flexible.
resist that, can't we? We can resist
Yeah.
that. We can shut down. We can try to control. We can try and shape and mold. We can, you know, try to overpower. We can really react to that. The intensity of feeling. But what you've shared with us today, Shelby, is that's what you feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, was getting in the way of your first two births. And on some level, with all that preparation you did and really delving into that inner landscape, you were able to really choose to trust the process, to trust the birth, and to lean in to the intensity of it. Does that feel like it's
Yeah, and you
accurate?
just reminded me with that midwife, that is so
Mm,
beautiful. She mentioned, "Are you resisting?" Because
yeah,
in this style of breathwork I do, our number one question we'll ask is, "What's happening in your body?" And that's the first question we ask.
yeah.
And so that, when I first started practicing this, I was numb. And
Mhm.
now I'm starting to understand my body. And I would take that question into birth. I even asked my husband to ask me that, "What's happening in your body?" So I
Yeah,
could get back into my body.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
ultimately trust it and trust the process, like you said.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for bringing up you know, aspects of birth and the process of welcoming these babies with a level of depth that we've touched on, I think, in different episodes, but you've given us a real gift today, Shelby, in helping us to understand that ultimately the journey that we must make as women is to learn to trust ourselves, to allow ourselves to feel, to allow ourselves to suffer, go through the pain, because there's no getting off the bus, to work with those defense mechanisms that can cause us to shut down, to freeze, to resist, to fight, flight, try to run away from, um, and to really push past those sorts of reflexes into the juice of what birth has to offer us. Because what she wants from us is to become the mother, and the mother is a bigger version. She's got to mature, she's got to grow up, she's got to be ready to move beyond her own needs to the needs of a newborn. And it's a rite of passage, absolutely. In other words, it's a transformation. And I think what you've done today has really helped us to understand birth on a much deeper level. So thank you. Thank you, Shelby, for coming back for baby number 3. And I hope today's episode has been very enlightening. You're on a ride, and it's a very valuable ride. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.